WMFD.com. It is Coffee Talk with Jay Fox. Joining us live in the WMFD Zoom studios today, Joe Trolian and also Mike Smith. And you guys know each other. How did you guys find each other after all these years?
Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook. We've both graduated from Gallion High School, and we were in musicals together and singing groups together, and we've kept track of each other through that. But recently, we've sort of reconnected through this veteran suicide awareness that we've been doing. So
I got a couple of Gallion Tigers afoot.
Absolutely. And we
love
spell
it.
Tiger correctly.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yes, you do.
There you go.
So the audience knows Joe because we've done a lot with mental health in the past few months, the Know It Before You Need It campaign. And this is a subject that is personal to me. I've been a certified suicide prevention counselor for over 10 years. Spent a lot of time talking with people about these issues, both in person and on the phone. And I'm curious to know, how do push-ups come into the mix when we're trying to prevent suicide? Because this may be a panacea. So tell me about 22 push-ups each day for 22 days.
Yes, it's a great, if you will, chain letter version of Facebook. So this has been going on for a number of years now, that primarily it's veterans that are doing these, but the idea is that on average, about 22 veterans per day lose their life to suicide. And it's just a number that is way too high. And, ideally that number would be zero,
Right.
But it's certainly way too high. And so somebody came up with this at some point, that we would do 22 push-ups for a 22-day period. And each day we would post on Facebook that experience and talk about whatever it is we want to talk about, which makes it so such a great experience, very unique, because each person that does this puts their own spin on it. And so even if you've seen this on Facebook with somebody else, the next person that does it, you're going to hear different messages, and you're going to hear different experiences and stories that come with that. And it really is a great opportunity for people to get the word out that we need help in our mental health. All of us do at some point, and particularly if we're having real difficult struggles. And so the posting each day brings awareness. We always have the National Crisis hotline there for folks to be able to call and to spread the word on that.
So you're the Navy man standing in solidarity. For those that might not know where the number 22 comes from, the 2019 National Veteran Suicide Prevention Annual Report published this number, and the number is made up of a variety of different folks. Veterans, 16.8, former Guard reservists that were never federally classified 2, and active duty, 3.8, for a total of 22.6. And they've taken the number 2 and the number 22 rather, and they have used this to raise awareness, something that is easy to remember. When you think about 22 suicides per day, Joe, that's a lot of people. And I realize that that's a national number, but for a subgroup, it's a high number.
Well, and to make it even higher, because typically and been working in the field of suicide prevention for most of my career. When you talk about the suicide rate for every one of those 22, there are probably 24 additional people that attempted suicide that did not complete. So we're talking about almost 200,000 veterans a year. Now, granted, that number is probably a little lower, and that's not a good thing. And it's because typically veterans use more lethal means than the typical population. So it may be fewer attempts to completion, but still there's a lot of people out there who are just hurting and need help. And what Mike is doing is showing that it's okay to get help, which I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people that they think that they had to reach the end of their rope before they got help. And it's so much easier when people just reach out when they're hurting. People have no problem reaching out when their blood sugar is spiking or when they have high blood pressure. We're human beings. These are our bodies. The brain is the largest organ in the body, and why we view it differently when we're having a difficulty in our brain than we do when we're having difficulty with our breathing or our circulatory system still just boggles my mind.
Well, we are all roughly the same age. Mike graduated from Gallien in 1987. I graduated from Hawkins School in 1986 up in Cleveland. And it doesn't surprise me that people of our age group have a problem talking about this because we were conditioned not to talk about it. What surprises me is that the veteran age group with the highest suicide rate is 18 to 34. And you would think that those people of that age group, the communications class, it might have an easier time, and they're not.
No, they're not. And there's a stigma to having mental health. People believe that there's a sign of weakness if you have these things going on in your brain. You ought to be able to control it. How can you not stop yourself from having a panic attack and suicidal thoughts? And those things are all things that, to people who haven't really gotten the help they need, they believe that they have something wrong with them and that they're weak in some fashion. And when you're in the military, it's even more amplified because the military is an organization that trains people to be tough and strong and independent and do things that, most of the country doesn't do on a regular basis. So when you put them in that environment, they are less likely in general to talk about their problems. For example, I was in the aviation world. There were lots of medications, or the theory at least was there were lots of times that when people were taking certain medications, they were not allowed to fly. When I had my issues, I didn't want to tell people about it because I was afraid they were going to diagnose me a certain way, give me some medication. Now, not only am I frustrated and struggling and having issues, but now I'm not allowed to do my job either.
Right.
And there are a lot of things like that I think come along with people who just they aren't educated because frankly, they haven't gotten the help they need. Once they get that help and understand the help is out there, that people can help them work through these things, all of a sudden there's this light that comes on and they realize it's not nearly as bad as it sounded at first.
Mike, did you go into the Navy straight out of Gallien High School, or did you go to college first?
I went to college at the Naval Academy. So
okay.
I left Gallien in 87, July 1st, 1987. I raised my hand at the United States Naval Academy, which is in Annapolis, Maryland. Mm-hmm. I had my 4 years as a midshipman there. I got a Bachelor of Science degree. I signed up to go into aviation. I should back up a minute. In 1986, the movie Top Gun came out, and one of my best friends and I went to see the movie over at Bucyrus Theater.
We all did.
we came out of that. We said, that's what we're going to go do.
Absolutely.
And so I thought my eyesight wasn't as good as Tom Cruise's, apparently. So I wasn't going to be able to be Maverick. I was going to be Goose. And so I became a naval flight officer and started training down in Pensacola later in 1991. So that was my path into getting into the aviation side.
Mike, you had said that you had started to face some issues. How old were you when you first noticed that you were having an experience that you were not expecting?
Oddly enough, I didn't realize this until I started this push-up challenge. I was 22.
22.
Which I think is just kind of ironic. It was the year, my last year at the Naval Academy. It was actually the week of graduation. So Naval Academy does a whole week long period of celebrations. It's parades and Glee Club concerts and dances and all kinds of things. The Blue Angels do a show there. And so it's a whole week long of celebration. And that week, all of a sudden, I something hit me, and I didn't know what it was. And instead of being with my family, who had a bunch of family come in for the graduation week, I was lying in a bed, curled up, trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with my head. What was wrong with me? Was I dehydrated? Did I not eat right? And all these things going through my head. And finally, I did know a doctor there who had become a bit of a friend, and he said, well, you might be having a panic attack. And so that was the first time I'd ever.
In 1991, did anyone know what a panic attack was?
Not that I knew of, and certainly nobody was talking about it. Again, it wasn't something that I would admit. In fact, going through this process of posting on Facebook, I've had a couple people say, I had no idea. I lived right down the hall from you. No idea this was happening. And they wouldn't have, because I wasn't saying anything.
Did you feel shame? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, it was incredibly frustrating, because things that I had done just weeks prior, I could not do without breaking out into a sweat, feeling like I was going to pass out, complete anxiety, having to get up and leave something that I had done, 100 times before at least. I sang at the Naval Academy Chapel with the choir. All of a sudden, I'm in the final time I'm going to be there, and all I could think of was, how do I escape? How can I get out of here and not embarrass myself? That was all I could think of the whole time. I just have to survive this. So yeah, it was embarrassing. It was frustrating. It was uncontrollable in my head, and nothing that I knew up to that point could explain what was going on.
Statistically, some people, when they go through this, they turn to drugs and alcohol to find a relief from these feelings. Did you have that experience, or did you just curl up in a ball and go to sleep?
That was, again, the problem with, I guess the good thing about being in the military at the time was I knew if I did any of that, I was going to be kicked out.
Right.
Certainly there's, I wouldn't have gotten kicked out for drinking some alcohol, but any kind of drugs in my system, we had regular drug tests that would have gotten me kicked out. So I don't remember really thinking about that. I just remember thinking, this does not make sense, and I don't know how to explain it to anybody. And thankfully, I got just for probably 15 years, 10 to 15 years, I got just enough help to get me past that next thing. I got just enough help to get me through graduation. I got just enough help to get me through a 6-month deployment on an aircraft carrier. I got just enough help to get me there. But after about 10 years or so, I realized that I couldn't do it anymore. It was affecting every aspect of my life. And that's when I finally got help.
So now you're in your 30s, and you're realizing that this is almost paralyzing, and you have to address this. Were you married by this time?
I was married and had kids.
Okay.
At this point, I was out of the Navy, and I would have these nightmares where the nightmare was that somebody was invading my house. I had to protect my family, and I couldn't physically wake myself up and get out of bed. And then I would actually wake up and realize that my dream was that I couldn't wake up and get out of my bed, and I'd wake up finally and be in a cold sweat. And I would have panic attacks just sitting at the table with my family eating dinner. I would have panic attacks at church. I would have panic attacks at work. I would not be able to sit through a work meeting without having to stand at the back and pretend like, I need to stretch my legs, or I need to, whatever. And the real reason was I needed to be closest to the door so I could escape if I had to.
So you had both conscious and subconscious paralysis, both awake and asleep.
Oh, absolutely. And the dreams were not like, your normal nightmares that I think people talk about. It was it was me dreaming about the fact that I was having panic attacks and I couldn't control myself. And
vicious cycle.
yeah, and it just got to be where every day, multiple parts of the day now were being impacted. And I knew at that point that it was well beyond my control, even though, again, I had gotten some help along the way. This was now, it was going to impact my career. It was going to impact my family. I'd be short-tempered with my daughters, that kind of thing. That is just not like me. I don't think it's like me. I think I'm better than that. But, I don't think it was my natural character. And so I finally did go and get help.
So, Joe, here we are 30 years down the road-ish from, when he first had his issue. And we know that awareness and education and early intervention is absolutely the key to solving this problem. In what ways can we get in front of this with the veterans to let them know that at the very first sign of trouble, they have to raise their hand?
Well, I think one thing you heard loud and clear throughout Mike's story is a lot of it's a control issue. And the military is nothing but control. You control your environment, you control your situation. It's where we see a lot of onset with anxiety, especially among men. We're terrible at this. We like control over our lives. Reaching graduation, I can probably tell you 2 or 3 dozen people that I've talked to that I've worked with anxiety issues, that was when things started. When they're about to leave their controlled environment and head out into the unknown. Mike was a special situation. I mean, his fiance was going to be a year behind him. So he was going to leave her while he goes down to Pensacola. So again, a security piece there.
Sure, that's a frightening prospect.
So surprised from the standpoint that I've known Mike for a long time. And yeah, in high school, you'd never seen this guy was overly confident, just all there, the whole package. He was theater and an athlete, which you didn't get too many of those.
Now that would make him a Renaissance man.
Exactly. And so from that point, it was surprising, but the situation under which it started, or the first triggering situation, was very textbook. It's what you see, and it's just kind of regaining that level of control. And I think that's what we deal with a lot of our vets, is they're control. And when we pull them out of that, the big thing I said about one time talking about Desert Storm, we work very hard. I mean, put people through 6 weeks, 12 weeks of training and intense grilling to create soldiers. And then we give them like 3 weeks to deprogram them and send them back to society that's not at all ready for them.
Right.
And it's since changed. We're seeing a lot of those changes happen because it's probably been since, I would say, late 90s, early 2000, that the military has really seen, wow, we have things really increasing. And the report that I provided for you, the 2019 report, even back before that, it's just been a steady increase year after year. And so we now have civilian organizations that will work with veterans. You don't have to just go to the VA hospital or to the VA clinic, because we know they're backed up. You're waiting 3-4 months to get in for services. So we have a number of local providers that can work with TRICARE insurance and things like that to make sure that we've got other options that are available in communities.
I would be curious to know, and maybe a good follow-up to this piece is to talk to the naval recruiter here in town. If this is discussed walking in.
That's a good question. I can tell you that it's definitely discussed in the services today, and it was not when I was there. We spent more time talking about drugs and alcohol abuse back then, and I was at sort of the forefront of what they call safety stand-downs, which is, you stop work for a whole day or a portion of the day, and everybody gets trained on various aspects of what we were doing, depending on the type of command you were in at the time. But a lot of that was general training about safety stand downs and about mental health, from a more of the how are you dealing with the drugs and the alcohol piece. But this idea of general mental health awareness and getting that support and raising your hand when you have a problem, you know, those things have gotten more and more consistent across the years as time has gone on, which is good. I don't know if they do it before you get in.
Well, I was wondering if there was some sort of a mental health evaluation, or is there a conversation about if you are having these kind of reactions or these kind of circumstances, you know, again, going back to the know it before you need it concept, you know, be aware of the signs so that you can act upon them proactively rather than waiting until, you know, it's too late.
Good question. I don't know if they have that today.
That'll be the subject of our next coffee talk with Joe Trolian. We'll find out.
We'll start working on the research. Yeah. But yeah, I think a lot of it too is working with people who are going to be officers, working with people who are going to see people as they're coming in. You know, you enlist somebody who is 18, 19, 20, they may be fine today. You know, right. The one thing we know is that the human brain does not stop developing until about the age of 25. And it's why there's always this argument of, well, that drinking age of 21, I'm old enough to serve my country, I should be old enough to have a beer. Well, you know, if the neurologists had their way, the drinking age would be 25, because that's when the brain should be done developing and you have less chance of doing damage to your brain from just, you know, taking a drink or doing drugs or something like that. But those brains are developing, and we're putting people in very high stress situations. And so their brain is kind of mapping around that idea of high stress. Well, if you're ready for that high stress, then suddenly you move into a life where you don't have that high stress. All that adrenaline flowing has got to go somewhere. And people have a hard time recognizing this is just a brain chemistry issue. Yes, there are triggers you need to work with. Counseling is very helpful just to process. But even as a therapist, we're just a non-chemical version of a medication, because we're helping you process through that, and your brain is training itself to deal with stressful situations or new ways to cope when these symptoms start occurring. And so it's having people that are in positions of authority that can recognize those early signs, because most of us, I mean, Mike, you probably started demonstrating symptoms even before you were curled up, but it was probably a slow build. It was, you know, this day I just felt really uncomfortable. During this situation, I got a little short of breath, didn't think anything of it. And that's typically when you go back and you start looking, you'll find those symptoms. We may be able to find some stuff that happened in high school. Who knows, you know? You went to the state championship. I'm sure there were some high stress situations underneath there. So, but though it's looking back over those, and that's where I always say I kind of give away my job. Therapists just help you see the forest for the trees and help you kind of sort out the milieu.
Yeah, and I will say that the number one thing I think I got, the realization I came to is I'm not going to die in a panic attack. You know, the panic attack is uncomfortable, it's stressful, it, you know, makes you sweat and feel lightheaded and all those kinds of things happen. But it's not something that's, you know, going to kill me. But if I let it get out of control and I don't seek help and I don't understand what's going on, then that's where people get into this. I've got to do something that is extreme to deal with this. And it's just not a place you want to go. Get that help early once to get somebody who can explain it to you and to give you mechanisms for breathing through a panic attack or dealing with, you know, the feelings that come with that overwhelmed kind of feeling that you have. How do you deal with that? How do you get past it? How do you work to get beyond that, you know, what probably is only going to last 5 or 10 minutes, but seems like it's going to last the rest of your life. You know, You just need somebody to walk you through that and give you those exercises to be able to do. And that doesn't mean that I don't ever have issues. You know, they still come to me. I still have moments, but I could deal with them so much easier, so much better than I could before.
Well, and just hearing your story today and then disseminating this broadcast will help people who are dealing with this issue. The concept of talking about our experience, sharing our feelings, sharing what we did to get through that experience, even if somebody who's having a problem doesn't listen to the first 10 stories, but that 11th story somehow resonates with them and it hits home, then maybe they will take your advice and get the help that they need. And Joe, if somebody is watching today and they do need help, what is the best place for them to go?
I mean, if you want to go directly to services, and first thing I always encourage people is check with your insurance company. You know, if you have insurance, make sure you go to somebody who's on your list of providers. Counseling, it should be affordable. It should cost you no more than a regular medical appointment. But boy, if you go outside a network, they very rarely will pick up the cost. So make sure you work with your insurance company. With the military, they have TRICARE that they work with, and I know Catalyst Life Services and Family Life Counseling are two agencies that we contract with. That TRICARE. There are also a number of private providers. I believe Dr. Marikas is able to work with TRICARE. I believe Blake Wagner's organization, he's got a couple of counselors there. So if you have insurance, that's some other places you might want to look for. We have an excellent VA clinic here. Right on Trimble Road. It's a beautiful facility. If you can get in, that's a great place to go. They've got a number of doctors there that will also work with you, especially if you're reservist or, now I don't want to say not active duty, but haven't been called up but have that opportunity. You're still on the VA still wants to work with you. But if you don't know where to go, we always encourage people, you can use the know it before you need it, which is know it for before you, the letter B, the letter number 4, the letter U, needit.com. There's a .org. I'm going to cheat. It's .com.
It is .com.
Thank you. We try to load that site with a lot of information of what's available in the community. We have our one-pager out there, and we actually list the hotline for the veterans on there. There's also a local warm line for people who just want to talk. You may not be in crisis, but you just need someone to talk to. We've got that man 24/7, and that's 419-522-5300. And then we also have a crisis hotline. If you're feeling like you want to harm yourself or harm somebody else, please call our hotline. And that's 419-522-4357 or 522-HELP. We have lots of options available in the community, but we just want people to reach out. And bottom line, worst case scenario, call the board. Ask for Joe Trolian. I will listen to what you have to say, and I will try to find you the best fitting therapist that we can come up with. And I always tell people, if you go into counseling and you're not really hitting it, ask for another therapist. Therapists are like shoes. Just because we say 10.5 doesn't mean we all fit. So find one that fits, and don't feel ashamed if you have to say, you know, you and I we're like oil and water. I need to go see somebody else. Or you may get in there and find out, wow, I would rather deal with a male than a female. Or, I mean, and that's perfectly okay. That's why we try to have large organizations with lots of options.
Joe Trolian, representing the Richland County Mental Health Board, thank you for being with us today. Mike Smith from the 1987 Galleon Tigers High School class and the United States Navy, we thank you for your service and thank you for sharing your story with us today. And we will certainly follow up and see if we can get some folks from the naval recruiters to tell us about how they deal with this issue. We've been talking about veteran suicides and 22 push-ups each day for 22 days. You know, you can certainly go online, look for 22 for 22, and you will find all kinds of stories, and we encourage you to do that. This has been Coffee Talk with Jay Fox, sponsored in part by the Cove Coffee Shop in Ontario, Ohio, an exclusive product of WMFD Television News in Mansfield, Ohio, and available at all times on WMFD.com. Thank you so much for watching.